Hey, hey, hey! My name's Helium the Scripted, or Nephilim if you'd prefer. Welcome to my cozy corner of the internet. This is the 6th chapter of the Kiri Baku Mulan AU, written by XX Cypress Minerva XX on AO3, which is entitled Eijirou. Unfortunately, I am sick at the moment, which is seemingly as a result of my COVID vaccination, but hopefully I'll be feeling better soon. The summary of this chapter is as followed. Enough screwing around! Order! Endeavour taps impatiently at his clipboard, nostrils flared. Order! Zero's hand shoots up. I'll have some chicken curry. Oh, can I get some katsudon? I'm kinda hungry. Midoriya chimes in, stomach grumbling as if in agreement. Everyone roars with laughter, slapping him on the back as he smiles sheepishly. Todoroki sighs. Everyone is saying food, but I guess you dropping dead isn't edible, is it? With that summary alone, this has solidified my love of this fanfiction. Todoroki is very relatable, but also fucking hilarious to voice, being that when angry, his voice is still monotone, or at least evenly toned. Now I implore you to sit back and relax whilst I read to you. Chapter 6. Good job, dumbass. Endeavour grumbles and yawns, icy blue gaze settling on the young captain. What do you want? His voice is rough from sleep, and he scrubs a hand over his face before turning to light the candle by his bedside with a lick of flames. I want the chick passing as a man the fuck out of my camp. Katsuki growls. Voice low and dangerous. Believe him, he wouldn't get a mile near this arsehole's tent without a good reason. You have a list of names for these morons. Gimme! Endeavour glowers at him. I don't take orders from you, Captain. Don't give a damn! Katsuki grumbles. List! Give it! I should blast you away for even entering my tent. Do it! I'll fucking take you with me! Endeavour extinguishes the candle with a sharp inhale. I don't have any time for this. You want the list so damn bad, then just take it. Leave me in peace. Katsuki snatches the clipboard off the desk, making sure to kick Endeavour's futon on his way out. The tent flap snaps shut behind him and Katsuki takes a deep breath, grounding himself. It was around midnight. Crickets chirped in the tall grass, their song piercing the night. Katsuki stomped through the meadow to his own tent, angrily flipping through the pages of names and scowling at Endeavour's messy, chicken-scratch handwriting. Uraraka, meh, Mineta, gross, Todoroki. He wrinkles his nose in disdain, slumping onto his cot. Kirishima. That dude was fucking weird. Loud, annoying, laughs way too much, and wears a fucking Halloween costume to a war. He's definitely fucking hiding something. Katsuki knew. He was obviously not a chick, if his bare chest is anything to go by. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something was definitely going on. From the shadows, he had watched the men eye him warily, too afraid of Katsuki to come at him directly. The redhead hadn't seemed to notice, scooping up rice like he did it for a living, humming softly to himself. They had forced him to set up camp near the horses, away from everyone, but he didn't seem to mind as he led his black stallion to the makeshift stable, saying something about being bunkmates in an exciting voice. As Katsuki watched him go, he couldn't help but glare at his bare back. Wasn't that fucker cold or some shit? Why was he walking around shirtless? He had a friend, way back when, that walked into class without his shirt on because someone told him he had abs. Was it something like that? Katsuki leans back and closes his eyes. Well, it wasn't a lie. The guy did have abs. A six-pack, in fact. The guy was built like a goddamn bull! Katsuki's lips spread into a menacing scowl. He extinguishes the candle and turns away, shutting his eyes tight as he tries to force himself to sleep. Damn shitty-haired bastard. Kyokujiro chirps with the rising sun, and Denki peels himself off Kirishima's chest, rubbing his eyes sleepily. The porridge he had stolen from the food storage tent sits lukewarm next to the messy futon, and he grins. Denki jumps up and down on Kirishima's chest. "Rise and shine, Sleeping Beauty!" He slaps the redhead's cheeks, rapping his knuckles on his forehead. "Come on, get up!" Eijirou answers by yanking the covers over his head. 5 more minutes. He groans, shivering when Denki pulls the covers from his body. He fumbles for his stolen blanket. It's too early. "Come on, get ready! Stole some breakfast for ya!" Denki hops down next to the porridge, scooping up in his paws. At the mention of food, Eijirou reluctantly sits up, stretching his arms over his head, as he yawns widely. Denki clambers up Eijirou's leg, nearly spilling the porridge, before he thrusts it into Eijirou's hands. "You got porridge!" The porridge sloshes in the bowl, the bacon and egg smiley face beaming up at him. "And it's happy to see ya!" Jiro peeks into the bowl. She was hungry too. Ever since her curse had taken effect, she had been forced to eat cricket food. She missed eating regular food like porridge. Denki nudges her away from the bowl's rim. "I know you're hungry, Jiro. I'll get you something later. I just don't want to get here sick, Sol." Jiro sighs before nodding. "Wait, your name is Jiro?" Eijirou blinks. "You can have some too." Denki begins to stuff porridge into his mouth, cutting him off. "No time to talk. It's your first day, remember? Don't get into any trouble and no fighting, unless you have to kick another guy's butt." "But I don't want to kick another guy's butt." Porridge dribbles down his chin, and Eijirou manages to swallow the food building up in his cheeks. No doubt he looked like a chipmunk. "Don't talk with your mouth full. Show me your war face, eh?" Eijirou can't help it. His lips quirk up in a grin. Denki blinks. Once. Twice. "Oh, I think my bunny slippers just ran for cover!" He yanks Eijirou forward by the dark strap across his chest. "Come on to scare me, man!" "Ah!" Eijirou roars in Denki's face, crimson eyes darkening as he snarls. Denki lifts the bowl of porridge off his head, laughing gleefully as he points at Eijirou with a "see what I mean" look on his face. "Aha! There's a tough-looking warrior! That's what I'm talking about!" He pops open a can of gel, spiking his hair into place. "Now you're gonna get out there and make me proud!" Tokoyami pushes his head through the tent flap, nickering at Denki and staring off into the distance. The blonde puts his hands on his hips as Eijirou starts to pull on his hero costume. "What do you mean they just left?" He snaps, falling backwards when Eijirou stumbles out of the tent, tugging on his boots and rushing towards the retreating recruits. "They what?" Denki crawls out of the collapsed tent and darts out after him, clutching his headpiece. "Wait, you forgot your—" But Eijirou's already gone, over the hill and down the slope, shouting and waving at the army to wait for him. They laugh at his ridiculous entrance, but he doesn't seem to mind as he falls into step with the rest, chattering excitedly. "Look at him go, Jiro, off to destroy people." Jiro chirps at him as he starts to scrub at his eyes. "No, I'm not crying 'cause of that. I think I got gel in my eye, and it burns really bad." The field bustles with men, shouting out greetings and curses alike. Other soldiers lay on the green grass with their hands behind their heads. Others sharpen their weapons or train with their quirks. Some even recount tales of their homeland, describing their families or farms with a wistful glint in their eyes. "Enough screwing around! Order!" Endeavour taps impatiently at his clipboard, nostrils flared. "Order!" Sero's hand shoots up. "I'll have some chicken curry!" "Ooh, can I get some katsudan? I'm kinda hungry." Midoriya chimes in, stomach grumbling as if in agreement. Everyone roars with laughter, slapping him on the back as he smiles sheepishly. Todoroki sighs. "Everyone is saying food, but I guess you dropping dead isn't edible, is it?" The field explodes with laughter and wheezing. Recruits are leaning on each other for support. A few flop on the ground, tears streaking down their faces as they laugh hysterically. "That's not funny!" Endeavour roars before stalking off to the side, heavy stomps making the ground underneath him shake. Eijirou makes it just in time, rushing into the clearing just as they start to line up for training, eyes scanning for an empty spot. Zero smacks Todoroki's chest. "Look like our new friend slept in this morning. Come on over, Kirishima." Eijirou's eyes narrow, but he smiles nonetheless. Beaming, he takes his place beside Zero, who leans over with his hands clasped behind his back. Eijirou hadn't noticed before, but his elbows kind of looked like tape dispensers. "Hey there, man," Zero beams, casting a glance over his shoulder. "What's your favourite food?" Eijirou laughs. "Ah, well, I have to say meat 'cause of my teeth and all." He sees a crowd starting to form around him, but he still grins at Zero even when a shadow looms over him. He hears Midoriya start to protest as Eijirou is once again wrenched forward by Todoroki, who lifts his fist to Eijirou's face. "Oh yeah," Todoroki glowered. "I still haven't paid you back." Eijirou grips his wrist, laughing awkwardly. "Interesting. That wouldn't happen to have a receipt, would it?" Todoroki glares at him, lifting him higher. "Bastard." The redhead stiffens, something in his chest seeming to constrict. It wasn't the first time he had been called that, and it probably wouldn't be the last, but he couldn't know, could he? No, that wasn't possible. They had never met before. Eijirou grits his teeth. He had to shut him up. Nobody could ever know about that. If they did, he'd be thrown out of the army for sure. Why would they allow Fat Gum's fake son into their ranks? No. He could be killed. He could die. He would never see his father, Togata. Tamaki. Being a man isn't about confidence or not knowing fear. It's living a life with no regrets. His brother had said. He closes his eyes for a moment, recalling soft voices and sturdy but gentle hands. The smell after rain, the warmth of the campfire. Tamaki was all of those things and more. "I thought it was strange I'd never heard of you before." Todoroki murmurs softly, almost to himself. "Now I know why." Fat Gum was probably too embarrassed to mention. Eijirou tears himself away from Todoroki's grasp, stepping away from him. "Look, man, I'm really sorry. I was really rude yesterday." He sticks out a hand with a grin. "Can we start over? If you don't mind, that is." Todoroki stares at his outstretched hand, like it was contaminated. Who cares if they'd never known each other before now? Eijirou was willing to try, for Tamaki. "Fight! Fight! 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 Fight!" The crowd roars, completely oblivious, only faltering when Katsuki Bakugo stomps into the camp. "Oi! Assholes!" Katsuki snarls, getting some satisfaction when at least a few of them flinch and cower. The rest fall into line, arms hanging loosely at their sides. He stalks over, eyes raking harshly over the first couple of recruits. Eijirou peers over to look at him, eyes wide in awe. Even as the captain pushes roughly at someone's chin to keep their head up. Eijirou huffs. "You'll assemble fucking quickly and quietly every morning before the sun is in the damn sky. You got it?" He lifts his shirt over his head, tossing it to the side. Eijirou feels his face flush when the captain slings a bow and quiver over his shoulder, making his way down the line. His bare chest and arms ripple with muscles, and the redhead has to avert his eyes. "And who fucking does otherwise?" For a split second, their eyes lock, and then Katsuki huffs out a breath, palms sparking. "What is that? Little explosions?" "Well, fucking answer to me!" "So Bakugo's that type of guy," he hears someone mutter under their breath. "Bull boy!" In one fluid motion, Bakugo knocked an arrow, aiming it directly at the line. His voice comes out like a snarl, and the soldiers step back, revealing the kid from earlier. Minetta's hairballs seem to quiver and shake, as he gawks at the blonde. Then Bakugo shifts the arrow and releases the string. It sails upward, embedding itself at the top of a tall wooden post, hammered into the center of camp. "Thanks for volunteering, moron!" Katsuki bares his teeth at the much shorter man, shifting the quiver off his shoulder. "Retrieve the fucking arrow!" Mineta growls, cracking his knuckles.
"I'll get the dumb arrow down, pretty boy, and I'll do it with my shirt on."
Eijirou hears someone beside him breathe out a sigh of relief. Oh, thank God. Mineta stomps up to the pole, reaching up and taking one of his hairballs from his head. "Hold on!" the captain interrupted, walking over to the impatient Mineta. "You're missing something!" He points his middle finger to Endeavor, gesturing to him. Endeavor grits his teeth and stands beside him, opening a wooden box. Bakugo pops open the lid, pulling out a large bronze disc, and thrusting it towards the crowd. "This represents discipline!" He loops it around Mineta's wrist, a masochistic glint in his eyes as the much shorter male struggles to keep his arm raised. He picks up the second disc, looping it around his other wrist. "And this represents strength!" It clunks to the ground, almost dragging him down as well. "You'll need both to get the arrow!" Mineta peers dubiously at the pole that towered over the camp. Once again, he plucks one of his hairballs from his head, giving it a squeeze. And then he's scrambling up the pole, hairball after hairball, creating handholds for him. Then, about halfway, the weight of the discs start to weigh him down. Eijirou hears him grunt, straining against the weight of the poles. And then he tumbles backwards with a surprised shout, slamming back into the ground in a groaning heap. One after the other, each man fell straight back to earth, toppling backwards or landing hard on their asses. Eijirou rubs at the sore spot on his lower back, feeling a pair of eyes glaring at him. "We've got a fucking long way to go!" Katsuki grumbles, grabbing a bundle of bow staff and tossing them out to the recruits. Eijirou catches his with ease, but from the corner of his eye he sees a boy about his age get knocked off his feet, staff clattering to the ground in front of him. The boy sighs and picks up the staff, running a hand through his brown hair. Eijirou stares at his rosy cheeks, his blue and white gym clothes. He kinda looked like that girl from his village. Maybe they're siblings. Eijirou's gaze is immediately drawn back to the front as Bakugo spins his own staff, picking up 2 clay pots from behind the empty barrel, smashing them into bits with precision and speed. When he brings his staff to rest in front of him, the recruits all gasp. Katsuki sneers at their shocked expressions. "Let's get down to fucking business!" The recruits all scramble to copy his stance. Eijirou could tell Katsuki was trying to go slow for them, so they get it, but men still end up accidentally whacking each other and losing their staff, even going as far as vaulting into tents. "The staff should be treated like an extension of your wimpy bodies. Learn to use it properly." The captain slams his staff into a recruit's chest, and they go flying with an indignant shout. "And maybe you won't die in battle. It would do you some fucking good to get a better fucking stance too." Eijirou ducks as a staff flies over his head. He does his best to follow Bakugo's strikes and blocks, and after a while he starts to find a rhythm. His staff spins in his hands with ease, and he beams, striking at yet another invisible enemy. He watches the captain's eyes narrow, suspicious, and then he speeds up, staff a blur in Eijirou's vision. The redhead grits his teeth, staff hitting his palms like drum beats as he struggles to copy the unceasing strikes. There's a long silence, and it takes a moment for it to register. Everyone was watching him, watching Bakugo. Staffs laying forgotten on the ground, their staffs twirled in the air, 2 blurs spinning in unison. Bakugo bares his teeth at him, reluctant respect flickering in his crimson gaze. And then something crawls up his back and eijirou yelps, limbs flailing wildly about as he claws at his back. He squeezes his eyes shut, missing how he easily takes everyone out with his staff. He sometimes wished he wasn't shirtless. Every brush of wind, blade of grass, or someone bumping into him feels 100 times worse than usual. Every little touch sent bolts of electricity up his spine. The men groan, rubbing at the backs of their heads. And then Bakugo grips his staff, wrenching it away from him with a snarl. Crimson eyes bore into each other, and eijirou can't help the awkward smile unconsciously spreading across his face. Fucking great! I asked for sons, and I got some shitty-haired bastard who can't handle an itch! Katsuki growls, shoving the staff hard against his chest, and watching as he almost topples over. Let's fucking go! We're doing something else, you bunch of idiots! A recruit opens their mouth as they file into line, but Katsuki glowers at them till it closes. You sing, you fucking die! None of that bullshit! There's a loud chorus of groans from the front of the line, and everyone snickers as the captain passes, shouting out curses and death threats. They stand in the surrounding forest, birds chirping overhead. eijirou looks around suspiciously. This was where the rooster had been coming from! He sure hopes he sees it. He misses home. Watch closely, losers! Katsuki growls before promptly stomping onto the wooden lever he had set up prior. 3 tomatoes sail upwards into the air. Katsuki releases 3 arrows at once, and they pierce the fruits with ease, hitting dead center on the 3 targets a distance away. The men share awed, even nervous expressions. Beat that! Katsuki jabs a thumb at his perfect shots, moving to the side with a scowl as the recruits fumble for their own bows and arrows. Each shot misses by a mile, wobbling through the air almost as in slow motion. Denki snickers from his place under eijirou's cape, before promptly stabbing one of the tomatoes onto eijirou's arrow before he can fire. The redhead looks at it in confusion, faltering in the middle of pulling the arrow back. Oi! A voice growls. The fuck are you doing? Eijirou jolts, bow going rigid in his hands. He whips his head around and grins sheepishly at the fuming blonde, who bared his teeth in a furious scowl. Oh, hey bro! He stammers, heart sinking as the captain merely snarls and stalks off. Bakugo stands perfectly balanced before the edge of the cliff that overlooks their campsite, a large wooden bucket of water resting on the top of his head. He spins his bow staff, gesturing for some of the recruits to throw small stones at him. The stones sail towards him. Grey blurs in the redhead's vision, but the blonde doesn't even blink as he deflects them with his staff. Not a drop of water is spilt. Eijirou grits his teeth, forcing his body not to shake as he's called to go first. Bakugo slams the bucket down on his head with a triumphant smirk, water already sloshing onto his hair and his bare back as the blonde tosses him a staff. He tried. He really did. The other recruits hurl their stones at him, snickering softly to themselves as his face visibly pales. His staff whirls, and he manages to deflect 2 of the stones before the bucket falls over his face with an audible clunk. He sighs, lifting the bucket from his face, just in time to see the mirth dancing in the captain's crimson gaze. And then it's gone, replaced with a hard and almost disappointed glare in his direction. Move aside, shitty hair! You're done! The recruits stand ankle-deep in a surging river, shivering and exhausted from training. The captain had ordered them to get their own food, wasting no time to turn it into a mentally painful learning opportunity. After a moment of dread-filled silence, the blonde's hand splashes into the murky water before wrenching it out. He grasps a large flopping fish in his palm and he gives it a menacing stare as it goes still, its mouth opening and closing as it gasps. "Jeez, talk about a sadist," he hears a recruit mutter. One by one, the recruits attempt to repeat his actions, hands darting into the water to claw for the slippery fish. Eijirou's hand splashes into the water, and his fingers close around something cold and wet. He yanks with all his might, letting out a gleeful laugh as he wrests the slimy thing from the water. It squirms and kicks, and Eijirou releases it with a shout. Todoroki glares at him from under the water, bubbles rising from his nostrils. "Oh, sorry, bro!" Behind him, the recruits burst out in song, voices carrying out into the forest. From trying to break stone slabs to having flaming arrows fired at them. Warbly and beautiful voices alike pierce the blue sky. Bakugo growls, but doesn't try to stop them. His throat was starting to hurt from screaming at them so much. They were the saddest fucking bunch of morons he ever met, but he still had a job to do. "Alright, losers, hand-to-hand combat," the captain says with a maniacal grin, and Eijirou feels his spirits lift slightly. He'd been practicing a bit since he'd gotten to camp. So how bad could it be? Bad. Very, very bad. "Take this!" Eijirou lunges forward, hardened hand grazing the blonde's flesh. Blood spurts from the small cut, and Bakugo roars, an explosion erupting from his palm, and leaving a trail of smoke as it scrapes Eijirou's ribs. The redhead barely flinches, a hardened body flying backwards as he regains his footing. "That won't work on me, explosion boy!" He laughs, slamming his fists together before lunging forward again, hardened hands slicing through the air in a relentless assault. Bakugo stares at him, calculatively, ducking and weaving to dodge his fists. He steps back hurriedly, jaw clenching almost painfully as they near the arena's edge. Eijirou almost grins, but forces his expression into something determined. The rules were simple. Knock your opponent out of bounds or knock them down. You could give up too, but that wasn't an option here, of course, and Bakugo didn't seem like the type to give in so easily. Eijirou hears it before he feels it. His skin is scraped by rough fingernails, an explosion raking itself across his flesh. He shouts at the sharp sting, teeth baring at the raw pain shooting up his spine. The redhead barely has any time to recover before his graze is filled with bright flashes of yellows and reds and oranges, sharp stabbing pain spreading throughout his skin. He raises his arms to shield his face from the blonde's brutal attacks, eyes widening as Bakugo starts to grin. He darts forward and Eijirou squeezes his eyes shut as his vision starts to go white, hardened skin starting to chip away. Too much! Finishing blow! Eijirou's chin jerks roughly to the side as the impact of an explosion knocks him back, and he can do nothing but grunt as his back slams into a tree. Now die! Denki appears when the captain's attention is pulled to the rest of the recruits, all ounces of humour draining from their faces, and being replaced by shock and even horror. The Pokemon douses his face in water, mumbling encouragement. "That guy's scary, huh? I'ma zap him." Eijirou doesn't hear the rest, because he's being yanked to his feet by another recruit, who just manages to drag him to the infirmary before he passes out. "Aim at the dummy!" The captain was roaring at them later that night, gesturing furiously at the straw scarecrow shaped like one of the villains, Shigaraki. Bakugo had snapped when one of the recruits had asked him. After seeing the barely contained killer aura emanating from the captain, everyone was too afraid to ask about it. "Which one? The one with the target on its chest?" A recruit calls out, steadily aiming their cannon towards Mineta, who just so happened to be wearing a blood-soaked shirt. He had gotten punched in the face earlier, and had refused to change his clothes because he said it made him look badass. Eijirou grimaced as the captain hisses at them to aim at the correct target, squeezing one of his eyes shut to measure the distance. And then the stand holding the cannon upright falls away, and the redhead fumbles to catch it. He just manages to grab hold of it before it launches, leaving a trail of soot behind it. The redhead stares in horror as the cannon arcs upward before crashing down on one of the tents. There's an enraged roar and a plume of fire signals that Endeavor's tent had just been destroyed. "Shit," he mumbles, dropping the smouldering cannon and stumbling back to camp. Laughter and whistles follow him as he leaves, trailing after him even as he makes his way to the center of camp. He hadn't realized, but he had made his way to center of camp where the large pole loomed. The arrow was still engraved onto its surface, and for some reason it makes him sad. Bakugo stares out over the camp, grumbling softly to himself as a crowd of recruits stare up at the large pole, eyeing the arrow. They all throw their hands up and shrug before stalking off to gorge themselves on rice. All but one. The redhead bastard slumps down onto the grass with a groan, clasping his hands behind his head as he stares up at the stars with an almost dreamy expression. He lays there for hours, mumbling softly and pointing out constellations, and Bakugo watches him. He completely forgets to eat or check his other dumbass recruits. For some reason, he hovers over him like some kind of fucking doting parent or some shit, waiting to see what he'll do next. It's not until around midnight that the redhead gets up and leaves, posture stiff and exhausted. He stretches his arms over his head, muscles rippled under tanned skin, and then he's gone, disappearing over the hill to his own tent. Bakugo stays there for a few more minutes. First, because he didn't want to run into him during his fucking patrol early the next morning. Second, to get his bearings because the blonde had been staring for almost 4 hours and his eyes stung. Thirdly, because he was transfixed. This bastard's fucking weird. Eijirou's legs buckle and he collapses, chin slamming into the hard-packed dirt. The bags of grain, held up by a staff, fall to rest on his shoulders and he groans. His breaths come out in quick gasps, chest constricting as his lungs quiver from exhaustion. "Come on, Kiri, you can still make it!" Denki says hurriedly, fanning and slapping at his pale cheeks and sweaty face. Jiro chirps at him, lifting his face with all her strength to make him stand, but to no avail. Eijirou's face burns from exhaustion and intense heat, muscles straining against the weight of the bags of grain. He had stayed up late to train his quirk, and it was starting to catch up to him. He needed to get stronger and fast. If he didn't, he'd be sent home, just like the other 15 men before him. It hadn't been pretty. From the front of the group, Katsuki grumbles as Endeavor snaps his fingers to get his attention, and as they reach the bend, he roughly says, "Another one!" Turning slightly, Katsuki can't help but glare at the redhead lying face down on the path. Upon reaching him, he watches him tremble and shake with exhaustion. "Shitty hair!" He growls, watching as his head whips up to stare at him, eyes bleary and cheeks flushed. He gapes as Katsuki easily hoists his staff onto his shoulders with a small scowl. "Get back to camp, shithead! You're done!" The order is sharp and bitter, each word landing like a slap. The captain turns to join the rest of the men, before a hand closes around his ankle, holding him in place. "Let go!" he snarls, attempting to shake the redhead off, but his grip is firm and unwavering, despite his condition. "Please!" Eijirou sounds weak. He knows he sounds weak. He pushed himself too far, had ignored all the signs. But he had to do it. He had to be strong. "Let me try again. I can't stop." The captain wrenches his ankle away with a huff. "How about you get up first, arsehole?" Eijirou strains, muscles clenching. But he can't move. His body hurts. His chest hurts. His head hurts. Everything aches and is fucking hurting. If you refuse to go down, it means you're stupidly strong, Bakugo murmured, almost to himself. Eijirou looks up in surprise, crimson eyes widening with surprise. The captain scowls and turns away, and then he's gone, shouldering his way through a crowd of men who part for him as they shoulder their own burdens. By the time he manages to stumble back to camp, night had already fallen. Dinner was long over, and people stumble towards their tents, and don't spare him a second glance. The redhead rubs his arms, still aching from training, with a small sigh. He had failed. He knew he had, but the captain wouldn't send him home, right? He had to give him another chance to prove himself. He nods. Yeah, he would ask, beg him if he had to. He was staying no matter what. Oi, shitty hair! The captain's voice cuts through his thoughts, eyes piercing the dark night with a venomous stare. Eijirou grows rigid when he sees Tokoyami being led towards him by the captain, head bowed in shame. You're not fucking suited for this shit! Bakugo grunts, tosses him the reins. His eyes are sharp, annoyed, as if Eijirou failing was the most infuriating thing in the world. To the redhead, it was. Pack up! Go home! You're through! Pain and regret burns inside his chest, and he wordlessly takes Tokoyami's reins from the blonde, head dipping low. He doesn't speak, as boots enter his vision, scuffing through the dirt as the blonde's shoulders past him to his tent, and frustrated tears sting at his eyes. He silently begins to guide Tokoyami back to his own tent, bottom lip trembling into a grimace. Eh? Denki's voice is soft, as the redhead slows to a stop in the middle of the camp. Tokoyami nickers softly, nudging his back with his muzzle to prompt a response from him, but he just stares blankly at the grass. Denki looks around nervously, scanning for other recruits, but they were alone. Steeling himself, he crawls up to Eijirou and pats his leg as tears spill from Eijirou's eyes. No, he grits his teeth. I'm not weak. I'm going to be unbreakable. I am unbreakable. He lifts his chin defiantly as he carefully lifts Denki onto Tokoyami's back. Despite the sharp stabbing pains shooting through his body, he heaves the heavy discs from their place beside the pole, tying them to his wrists. He coughs as he attempts to scale the pole with the added weight, grunting when he falls. He shakes the pained haze from his thoughts, lifting one of the discs close to his face. He then stares at it, long and hard, and then something clicks. He grins in triumph as the idea starts to take shape. The discs tangle together with ease, and his fingers lock around the silky surface of the ropes. He gives it a good tug as he takes a step, and then two. It holds his weight. One at a time, he heaves himself up. Sweat streaks down his face as he readjusts the discs, pulling himself up. He wills his feet to harden, and they dig into the surface of the pole. He climbs, higher and higher, until he feels the first rays of sunshine warm his face. Higher still, when from the corner of his eye he sees a crowd forming underneath him. Even higher, when he hears them cheer, shouting as his hand brushes the arrow. His shoe slips, and he bares his teeth, forcing himself to tug himself up. Eijirou pulls himself up, letting out a groan as he sits at the top, legs dangling over the side. His fingers close around the shaft of the arrow, and he yanks it free, thrusting it over his head like a trophy. He laughs as the other recruits yell and bump their fists, shouting his name like a chant. Kirishima! Bakugo bursts from his tent, a furious expression on his face because, what the actual fuck? It was 4 in the fucking morning! Moving to stand before the crowd of screaming men, an arrow embeds itself at the blonde's feet. The morning light bathes Kirishima in a golden glow, the fading shadows dancing around his feet and carving his face to look older than he really was. Eijirou beams at Bakugo brightly, waving furiously from his perch, and then the men cheer as he slings the discs over his shoulder with a laugh. "You bastard! I told you to go the fuck home!" Bakugo snarls at him, but the redhead only laughs louder. "Stop laughing! Get the fuck down here so I can pound you!" The redhead happily obliges, all the pain seeming to leave his body as he leaps from the top of the pole. The recruits all gasp as he covers his face with his arms, hardened with his quirk. He slams into the ground, leaving a large dent in the grass below. "Aha!" he shouts, pumping his fist. "There! I did your dumb challenge! Now I have to stay and train with you!" Bakugo grinds his teeth so hard, Eijirou swears he sees sparks. "I don't take fucking orders from you!" Eijirou's confidence deflated, but only for a second. "I'm not going anywhere. You can't make me." "I'll kill you!" "I have to be here," Eijirou says earnestly, pointedly ignoring the whistles and shouts Bakugo's response had received. "I have to be strong. I have to be unbreakable." Rolling his eyes, Bakugo grunts, spinning on his heels and marching away. There was no point trying to reason with this asshole. Stubborn fucker. "Don't give a damn! You can't fucking keep up with me! You'll be dead by next week!" "That a challenge?" Eijirou taunts, crossing his arms over his chest. He was on a high right now, and nothing could bring him down. We'll see who's running to catch up. Die, shitty hair! Thankfully, Eijirou wasn't one to bluff. He'd hit all his targets with his bow and arrow, piercing the tomatoes with ease. The recruits gawk at him as he passes them up to the front of the line, bumping his bag of grain playfully against Bakugo's, who snarls and shoves him back. Later, in hand-to-hand combat, Eijirou successfully lands a hit on the blonde, knocking him backwards. The blonde lays there, unmoving, and the redhead feels panic rise in his chest, rushing forward to help him up. But when Bakugo grabs his hand, his grip tightens and he flips him over his shoulder. He crashes into the ground, air rushing out of his lungs. Eijirou can do nothing but grunt as Katsuki stamps his foot on his chest, grinning in victory. "You're dead!" The captain growls, and the redhead lets out a breathless laugh, pushing himself up on his elbows. Eijirou rubs his chin and grins. "That was awesome, bro!" "Don't fucking call me bro!" Bakugo snaps before he stalks off, leaving Eijirou lying in the dirt. He hears the blonde mutter something else as he turns to address the other recruits. It's inaudible, so much that the redhead is almost convinced he imagined it. "Good job, dumbass!" Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate all the support you've given me. Holy shit, this video is so long. But I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments below. All credits go to the original creator of this fanfiction, XX Cypress Minerva XX on AO3. I would highly appreciate it if you gave this video a like, and you subscribe to the channel, and you hit the notification bell to be notified of when I next upload. There is no pressure to do so though. Thank you for visiting my cozy corner of the internet. Keep on growing, my sunflowers. Mwah!